Well, I wanted to start today with a quote from the 31st President of the United States, Herbert Hoover. And nobody ever starts a speech with a quote from Herbert Hoover. Hoover was, of course, a single-term president who had the disadvantage of presiding over both the beginning of the Great Depression and the institution of prohibition in the United States. Both of which probably hurt his re-election chances. But before he was president, Hoover was a member of the first graduating class at Stanford University in 1895, and he had great renown around the world as an engineer before becoming president. And Hoover wrote for a professional engineering journal in 1954 that engineering is a great profession. There's satisfaction in watching a figment of the imagination emerge through the aid of science into a plan on paper. And then to see it move to realization in stone or metal or energy. And then it elevates the standard of living and adds to the comforts of life. That this is the engineer's high privilege. Of course, then Hoover continued, the great liability of the engineer compared to men of other professions is that an engineer's works are out in the open, where all can see them. An engineer's acts, step by step, are captured in hard substance. An engineer can't bury his mistakes in the grave like a doctor. He can't argue them into thin air or blame the judge like a lawyer. He can't, like an architect, cover his mistakes with trees and vines. He can't, like a politician, screen his shortcomings by blaming his opponents and hoping that the people will forget. An engineer can't simply deny that he did it. If an engineer's works do not work, he or she is damned. But on the other hand, unlike the doctor, an engineer's life is not among the sick. Unlike a soldier, destruction is not his purpose. Unlike the lawyer, quarrels are not an engineer's daily bread. No doubt as years go by, people forget which engineer did what, even if they ever knew. Or some politician puts his name on an engineer's works. Or they credit them to some promoter who used other people's money. But to the engineer falls the job of clothing the bare bones of science with life, comfort, and hope. An engineer looks back on an unending stream of goodness which flows from his successes with the satisfaction that few professions can know. And the verdict of his fellow professionals is all the accolades that an engineer wants. I think President Hoover really did capture the essence of the joy of engineering, the sense of satisfaction from being able to contribute to a design and to see that design take flight in the world. To know that a creative idea is executed efficiently and effectively, and to see the abstract take shape and form. I am really pleased to be asked to be here today to join you and to be among my fellow engineering professionals as you begin this week's INCOSE International Symposium. I know that over the next few days, you'll be sharing that joy of engineering as you share best practices, as you discuss ideas that have worked or haven't worked within your organizations, and as you help build the future of system engineering. You know, system engineering is a relatively young discipline within the engineering profession, and since its inception, system engineering has really allowed us to explore new frontiers, to be able to rethink the engineering process, to deliver systems of enormous scale, of staggering complexity, and today of increasing criticality. You know, our profession has been continuously maturing as we have grown our design and development tools to leverage new technology and to deliver new capabilities. But there really is no shortage of significant challenges for our system engineering profession to take on. I like to think about kind of like making lists, and when I sit down and list, I think what the critical problems are that really consume the attention of the world today, I come up with 6 major challenges. The first, the challenge of securing a reliable and dependable energy resources for the future. The challenge of ensuring sustainable development in harmony with our environment. The challenge of delivering affordable health care to young and old. The challenge of supporting increasing demands on aging public and economic infrastructure worldwide. The challenge of delivering safe and sustainable food and water to a growing world population. And finally, the business that I spend most of my day working, the challenge of delivering security in the face of new and emerging threats. I think this set of challenges is interesting because at their heart, these are all fundamentally engineering challenges. Although these issues touch on the political, on business, legal, ethical, and cultural issues, at their core, these are all really complex systems that present engineering challenge on an enormous scale. It's almost as though the global and societal issues with the greatest impact on the future of life on this planet were all designed, diabolically designed, to challenge our system engineering capabilities. And so today, the topic I'd like to talk to you about, I'd like to focus this talk on, I think is an important one, an important challenge for our profession, for our nation, and for the world. And what I'd like to focus on today is the future of our profession. What does it mean to be an engineer? And more specifically, what does it mean to be a system engineer as we progress into the 21st century? I believe it's increasingly critical that we re-emphasize the importance of engineering to our global economy and to world security, and that we restore recognition worldwide for the value and criticality, the importance of large-scale engineering leadership. You know, despite the many engineering marvels that have been built over the last century and that are recognizable instantaneously all over the globe, I believe that engineers are simply not appreciated for their contributions to the success of society and to the advancement of our civilization. I worry increasingly that teachers, counselors, parents, and children today are not looking to engineering as their first choice for an engaging and successful career. And so I'd like to talk about the future of engineering, some of the challenges that system engineering faces, and maybe some things that we can all think about taking on to help increase our engagement globally in increasing the relevance of engineering to society. And I'd like to start by talking a little bit about how I've come to this perspective and why I think it's so crucial to the United States and to our friends, partners, and allies around the world. In my position day-to-day as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for System Engineering, I serve as the Senior Acquisition Engineer within the Department of Defense, and I believe that I'm the only political appointee in the Obama administration with system engineering in my title. My role within the department is analogous, I think, to that of Vice President for Engineering, a corporate VP for engineering in a large aerospace firm. My staff and I are engaged in setting policy and standards. We manage workforce issues, and maybe most importantly, we advise our leadership on technical investments. But I think the scale and scope of the department's engineering efforts are really without equal. The U.S. Department of Defense is made up of about 2.5 million men and women in uniform, 1.4 million soldiers, sailors, Marines, and airmen on active duty, an additional 1.1 million men and women who serve in our Guard and Reserve forces. They're supported by a civilian workforce of more than 700,000 employees. And the mission of the department is straightforward, to protect U.S. national security and to generate, equip, and support the military forces with the goal of deterring war and prevailing in conflict if ever necessary. The scope of the Department of Defense's engineering enterprise is equally vast. I believe that the Department of Defense, with its component military services and agencies, is the single largest engineering enterprise in the world, with an engineering workforce today made up of just slightly over 100,000 uniformed and civilian engineering professionals. To break down that number further, the department employs about 36,000 engineers in civil engineering and construction, and about 65,000 non-construction engineers. And of those non-construction engineers, 39,000 make up what we call our acquisition certified systems engineering workforce, folks who are directly involved in supporting the design, development, and delivery of complex military systems and technology. The Department of Defense's engineering workforce really represents a remarkable investment of U.S. national human capital. And there's a reason we make that investment. Over the last several decades, an increasing fraction of U.S. national security capability has been delivered by increasingly complex, integrated, high-technology systems and capabilities. And I think that folks really often fail to appreciate just how extensive that change has become. We think of these advanced systems in large-scale capabilities like our national space systems, but when one looks at even the individual dismounted infantrymen today, they're carrying an enormous amount of technology networked into a global grid and really enabled by the advances that we've been able to make in delivering complex systems of systems down to the individual combatant. I'd argue that most of the engineering work that goes on within the Department of Defense really is systems engineering work. It's focused on the specification, design, and management of complex systems and systems of systems. When we talk about system engineering, the definition of the term itself is often a challenge. And there's a great many definitions that one could offer for system engineering. And I know many of you by name out here in this audience today who'll be happy to spend the rest of the week debating with me the merits of particular definitions of system engineering, and I'm not at all interested in engaging in that debate. But one definition that I find useful, at least useful in the context of this talk this morning, in capturing the core of the engineering work that we're engaged in within the U.S. Department of Defense, is shown here. And that is a suggestion that system engineering is largely focused on the creative application of scientific and engineering principles to design, develop, construct, and operate complex systems, to forecast their behavior and interaction under specific operating conditions, and to deliver their intended function while addressing economic efficiency, environmental stewardship, and the safety of life and property. I like this definition because it captures, I think, three critical features of the modern system engineering practice. First, it's focused on complex systems. And I think it's really the inherent complexity and the emergent systemic properties of large-scale engineered systems that really has given birth and supported the growth of the discipline of systems engineering. Second, this definition emphasizes the need to be able to understand and predict the interaction within and among the components that make up our large-scale engineered systems. And finally, this definition emphasizes the need to see systems in context, to be able to understand their capabilities and limitations in terms of the larger world in which they interact. I think this definition is also a great place to start in identifying the gaps in our current systems engineering practice. I believe that the gaps in our current practice relate directly back to the historic roots of our profession. And they reflect often the fact that the promise of systems engineering has often outpaced our capability to deliver on those promises. And so I wanted to spend a few minutes kind of talking about some key gaps in our engineering practice And I'd like to talk about three, if I could, today. One, the challenge of dealing with complexity at scale. Two, the challenges that we have today in terms of quantifying risk. And then finally, I want to spend a few minutes talking about the challenge of predicting the impact of engineering decisions in the overall global product context. So let me start at the top there with complexity. You know, today, almost every modern system that you can think about is a complex combination of hardware and software interacting with operators and other systems, communicating through complex networks, and expected to operate under tight real-time constraints, under demanding environmental conditions, and within the Department of Defense anyway, expected to operate even when under attack. This is 21st century complexity, a very different kind of challenge, I think, than what we thought about in the past. But the challenge doesn't just end at the boundaries of a single system. Within the Department of Defense, for example, our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines conduct their missions by leveraging systems of systems, planning, coordinating, sharing information, and delivering effects at many scales. The same systems today support cross echelon with systems impacts spanning from an individual unit, all the way up to global and theater level impacts, all from the same systems of systems. I'd argue that our engineering tools, the engineering tools that are available to us today, often lack the power to adequately model and predict the interactions that occur within these large-scale systems of systems, and that this regularly results in unplanned and undesired consequences, which are often revealed as program development delays, as program development cost growth, as unwanted discoveries during developmental or operational testing, or through expensive, disruptive, and very visible failures that often lead to reduction in program scope or outright cancellation of activities. So what's missing in the way that we deal with complexity? I argue that much of our traditional engineering toolkit, our traditional systems engineering toolkit, is focused on a reductionist approach to analysis and design. We model complex systems as individual subsystems, and we perform design and verification on these individual subsystems. But our tools often fail us when we try to integrate those subsystems back into a holistic product, and then to scale that product into a systems-to-systems environment. We have very few tools today that allow design teams to iteratively explore, document, and optimize these larger scale design spaces across a complex integrated product domain. And our tools are even less adequate when we try to think about systems of systems, systems that live on the network with complex interactions that can lead to unplanned and often unwanted emergent behaviors. We really do lack kind of the toolkit to allow us to adequately define, express, and enforce a system architectural vision and system architectural constraints across the entire design lifecycle. Without adequate tools to allow us to visualize, assess, and optimize large, complex design products, we're often forced to make trades with inadequate information. We pay performance penalties because of poorly margined subcomponents, and we find ourselves in technical corners which often we're not able to get out of cleanly. Another major gap in our system engineering toolkit is our ability to co-design and co-develop software and hardware. In almost every program that I deal with today anyway, we separate hardware and software development into separate teams. Each team with their own tribal languages and tribal rituals. And when we deliver products to end users, those end users almost always look at their products from a functional perspective. Today, to an end user, it's irrelevant and often invisible whether a particular capability is delivered in hardware or in software. We need to be much better able to manage complexity across that hardware-software interface, to better be able to specify system function, to scope the level of effort required to design and deliver that function, and then to evaluate that performance of the individual products that result from those specifications without this artificial divide into hardware and software engineering. The second key challenge I wanted to talk about today quickly is the challenge of quantifying risk. One of the key duties of a modern engineer is to assess, understand, and manage technical risk throughout the product development process. Engineering needs to be focused not on eliminating risk. Instead, we need to be focused on ensuring that an enterprise has adequate knowledge to make informed decisions based on well-characterized technical estimates of likely outcomes. Smart risk-taking is often the key to product development success, but without effective risk characterization and management, our development processes are often flying blind. I think managing risk is particularly critical when time to market drives product development cycles. And there are very few domains today where time to market is not the critical driver of our product development. This is even true in defense systems, where the globalization of technology and the emergence of non-traditional threats have really dramatically increased demand for responsive, adaptive solutions deployed under shorter and shorter timelines. This dependence upon cycle time and the way that it changes the way we deliver products in the defense sector, I think is one of the real fundamental transformations that's underway in the aerospace and defense business. I think in these kind of environments, it really is even more critical that engineering drive product development to become more risk-aware and not risk-adverse. You know, product design and development is fundamentally an exercise in decision-making under uncertainty. Uncertainty about customer and marketplace needs and desires, uncertainty about resources and schedules, uncertainty about design performance and integration. Our management of technical risk is the way that we inform smart decision-making, and it's usually the critical practice that differentiates truly excellent engineering organizations from merely adequate ones. I believe we need to become much more sophisticated as a profession in the way that we model and quantify the likelihoods and consequences associated with our design choices. And the last engineering challenge I want to discuss today is the need to be able to predict systems behavior in context in terms of the larger world in which our designs interact. Of course, what distinguishes systems engineering from any other engineering discipline is the focus on systems. That set of interacting or independent components that make up an integrated whole. And as we all learn in our first systems course, systems are defined by the boundary that defines the system under study from its surrounding. But I think in the context of modern system engineering, we increasingly need to think past that boundary and to spend more time thinking about the larger environment with which our systems interact and with the feedback created by between the systems that we design and the context within which they are embedded. I think one critical context, and one that certainly shaping the Department of Defense in an interesting way at the moment, is the economic context. Affordability is an attribute that I think we often fail to explicitly specify in systems design. We often lack the ability to predict just how much a particular feature is ultimately worth to a customer. We're often unable to characterize a feature's worth in our designs in terms of its impact on affordability. In the defense context, what is a user willing to pay for an additional knot of speed? What's a user willing to pay for an additional mile of range? We really need to be able to get that user perspective, that quantified user perspective, into our engineering design trades. And without the ability to specify and predict performance in terms of value to the customer, in terms of explicit cost, we often find it difficult to make the real trades required in a portfolio context to satisfy customer needs in that larger economic environment. I think this challenge becomes even greater when one expands the definition of affordability to address not only acquisition cost, but also that cost of future operations and sustainment over a product life cycle. Another critical context is that of trust. An implicit feature of many of the systems that we design is the user's expectation that the systems will perform the function that they're expected to perform when called upon, and that they'll not perform any unauthorized function. Today, we develop systems in environments where they may be under attack from the moment that design begins, where we have concerns about protecting core intellectual property, and where latent cyber-physical vulnerabilities may pose long-term threats to users' trust in their systems. This is certainly apparent in the defense sector, but I think it's just as true in banking, in healthcare, in transport, in fact, in almost everything that you can think about. How do we predict the exposure of our systems within their operational context? And how do we begin to predict and address those vulnerabilities that are inherent within our system development process? And how do we begin to map those weaknesses into their ultimate impact on user trust and confidence? And the third context that I have to mention, I think that represents a challenge and a gap, is environmental. How do we begin to predict, do a better job at predicting, modeling, and mitigating the environmental footprint of our system design decisions over the very long term? How do we do a better job at characterizing the costs associated with their design choices on the global ecosphere? These are really just three examples, economic, trust, and environmental, that address the kind of larger context challenge within the system design space. Well, today, in all of our designs, we think about these kind of issues in system development. I really believe in the future that we're going to see a much greater focus on absorbing those larger contexts into our design process. And issues in economics and trust, environment, and in others will increasingly be shaping and increasingly constraining our design choices. The implicit assumptions we've been able to make in the past about the context in which our systems reside are going to need to be made into explicit design considerations, into explicit design choices. And we're going to need a much better toolkit, tools that allow us to characterize these larger contextual trades and to predict system performance in a broader domain. So how do we address these kind of gaps? I think at their heart, we face a much deeper global challenge in the need to better appreciate the value of our engineering capacity and our engineering capability. We all need to be working harder, I think, to find and shape the basic technical talent that'll help us work on these problems in these kind of domains where folks can make a difference. I think we need to be better promoting a larger public understanding of the nature and importance of engineering. And we need to be able to extend our systems engineering tools to address not only the current shortfalls, but the challenges that are on the horizon. I believe that as a discipline, one of our greatest weaknesses and one of our greatest opportunities is that we spend far too little time growing and shaping our most critical resource, the individual professionals who bring their energy, enthusiasm, and creativity to the engineering art. We tend to focus on the technical characteristics of product design and development, and we neglect those individual and social characteristics that draw people to our profession in the first place. I think that we need to rethink what it means to be an engineer, and what it really means in particular to be a great engineer. I'd argue that we need to insist that we begin to recruit, train, and develop our individuals in our disciplines with three key qualities in mind: breadth of understanding, technical expertise, and capability for leadership. I think breadth is really the distinguishing characteristic of a 21st century engineer. An ability to think past traditional disciplinary stovepipes and to integrate multidisciplinary solutions to real-world problems. We demand today that the modern engineer have a deep understanding of systems thinking and an ability to appreciate and integrate multiple technologies in the context of an end product. Great engineers today understand the product development process and can shape product excellence across and throughout design and development. Great engineers today both appreciate the role of a product within a larger context of the product domain and understand their customers' needs and expectations. Great engineers embrace this larger world picture and welcome the breadth of understanding and the larger external issues that shape the design and development process. But great engineers are also real engineers. They have a depth of expertise and the experience that it takes to make real technical contributions within their product domain. Great engineers are not generalists. Instead, they're experts. Experts with a strong understanding, however, of how their work affects a larger enterprise. And finally, I believe that great engineers are real leaders, capable of harnessing facts and data in their cause to inform technical decision-making, capable of challenging orthodoxy, and of motivating and inspiring individuals and teams to reach important technical decisions. Of all the areas that we address in our engineering training and development, I feel that this need to prepare and inspire all of our engineers to leadership roles within their own domains is really, I think, one of our most neglected opportunities. As I mentioned earlier, I worry that our profession today turns off and turns away far too many potential candidates to become great engineers. Just as one example, within the United States today, the majority of college graduates are women, and yet today women earn only 18% of our undergraduate engineering degrees. If we're going to maintain our future competitiveness, and if we're going to address those global engineering challenges I talked about at the beginning of my talk, we simply can't continue to fail to attract so many of our best and brightest to the engineering profession. And in doing so, I think there is a real opportunity that exists in rethinking engineering education. Today in the United States, our country ranks 27th among developed nations in a proportion of college students who receive undergraduate degrees in science and engineering. And surprising to me anyway, last year the United States graduated more undergraduates with degrees in the visual and performing arts than we graduated in engineering. Today, much of our engineering educational process remains trapped in traditional disciplinary stovepipes. When I visit campuses and meet with undergraduate engineering students, I find that many of our brightest young engineers are in fact planning to leave the field upon graduation because their undergraduate experience has disappointed them. Many of these students, like so many young people today, want to see their professional efforts clearly contributing to a greater whole, and they're disappointed that their engineering education has not included a sufficient focus on the economic, cultural, and societal relevance of their engineering work. These students are yearning for a greater multidisciplinary experience and really looking for one that includes a much greater exposure to systems thinking. I think there's a real opportunity available to us to rethink engineering education delivery. And I am excited to find that the faculty at many institutions are now rethinking engineering education for the 21st century, and in doing so are beginning to work to break down traditional departmental barriers in the process. I also believe that we lose far too many future engineering stars before their formal education ever starts. A recent survey conducted by the Intel Corporation asked teens across the country 2 questions. They asked them, what is engineering? And what one word do you most associate with engineering? Well, fewer than half of those surveyed could actually define what engineering was. And of those who did know what engineering was, the single word that they most commonly associated with the profession of engineering was the word difficult. I believe that we are all failing, and we're failing to communicate the natures and the pleasure of engineering. When we engage our friends, family, and the young people that we deal with in our daily lives. I think that we're failing to emphasize that engineering is a creative, social, and enjoyable activity. I think particularly as systems engineers, we are all engaged in collaborating and innovating on those big picture problems. And I think we need to be much more proactive in letting the young people that we deal with know that, with sharing that experience. Another way that we can reshape our profession is to expand and extend the system engineering toolkit. I own an older home, and it seems that we're always having work done on that home. When a truck pulls up outside our house, long before I have to write the check, I can typically tell what kind of craftsman has shown up based on what kind of tools they take out of the truck, be it a painter, be it a carpenter, be it an electrician, whatever we're working on today. Those tools that a craftsman takes out of their truck, if you will, defines their profession. And I believe that the toolkit that we deploy as systems engineers also defines our profession. I think we need new tools to distinguish a professional systems engineer. Tools that can help us reshape the design process in light of growing complexity, and that will help us address this need to better quantify risk and to characterize system interaction. Many of the tools that we deploy today derive from a previous era where computation was expensive, and therefore our processes focused on partitioning design into subsystems that could be computable. And our tools are really focused on exploring a very limited set of sub-designs, feasible sub-designs and design alternatives in any given area. I find that even today in 2013, in the majority of the organizations that I work with, we're still operating in a document-centered environment where we're using words as poor stand-ins to describe requirements, functions, and systems. I note that in fields such as integrated circuit development, we have seen radically new design approaches emerge. Today, in those domains, computer-aided design approaches permit individual designers to manage complexity hierarchically, to leverage and reuse components in a much more natural way, to simulate and optimize virtual designs quickly and inexpensively, to conduct virtual design validation, and to incorporate production planning rules directly into their design processes. I believe that we really are on the threshold of seeing these principles find their way into integrated design tool suites for complex electromechanical systems. I believe that we will begin to see a simulation become a much more integrated part of the design process over a much larger span of disciplines, rather than something that's engaged in separately or on the side. I believe we're going to see an ability now to affordably explore much more complex design spaces with an opportunity to better understand how changes that are made in a design at one point ripple downstream and impact the entire product design. I think that we're going to see the emergence of much better tools to support distributed design, allowing us to engage better with partners and suppliers in the co-development of complex systems. Achievements like these will go a long way towards addressing the challenge of increasing design complexity. I think they're going to inspire future designers to be able to take on much more complex problem domains domains like those 6 wickedly difficult areas that I described at the beginning of this talk. And I think that these tools will help define new roles and new ways for system engineers to engage with the product design process. I do believe that, that solving the pressing national and global challenges in security, sustainability, energy, and the environment will demand an increased focus on systems thinking and a recommitment to an engineering culture. I believe it will demand a culture willing and able to apply technical understanding to complex problems, a culture that values understanding how the world works, that wants to shape that world, to shape the energy, matter, and information around us to improve the world we live in. I think one of our greatest opportunities of the profession is to embrace the importance and the relevance of systems engineering in the 21st century, and to commit ourselves to encourage others to see our profession as central to solving the key challenges of our time. As you engage with your colleagues over the next few days, and more importantly perhaps, as you engage with your families, with your neighbors, and with your communities in the future, I'd like to suggest 3 big picture messages that you might want to think about keeping in the forefront of your conversation. First, I believe that system engineers are creative problem solvers. This is really, I think, the source of the inherent joy of engineering. The ability to bring our creativity, to bring our technical talents, and to solve real-world problems, I think is what has drawn so many of us to our profession in the first place. And I think that that really is the hope that engineering offers for our future. Second, I think we need to continuously emphasize that systems engineering is essential to our health, our happiness, and to our safety. I think this is key to the message that systems engineering is relevant in the larger world, and that we are concerned with solving the problems that matter, and that we look beyond the intrinsically technical to look at the systems aspects of how our designs, again, interact with the greater world. And finally, a third message I might offer is that we should emphasize that systems engineering will help us shape the future. As a relatively young professional discipline, systems engineering has enabled amazing progress in aerospace and defense, in telecommunications and information technology, and now is increasingly driving trends in fields such as urban planning, energy, and healthcare. I believe that large-scale systems are increasingly critical to our future, and systems engineering is uniquely placed to play a shaping role in defining that future for the positive. 3 messages I encourage you to take away, to incorporate in the messages that you bring to your communities, that you bring to your colleagues, a way to think about system engineering, and a message I think that we all too frequently fail to share in our everyday lives. I'd like to finish and close today with just that challenge to you, if you could, to take your professional tools, your system engineering toolkit, if you will, and apply it again to those problems that matter. I would really challenge you to go out and share your professional optimism with a larger community. And I'd encourage you to help us prepare and shape our overall systems engineering profession to take on the challenges of the future. I hope that you have a great symposium here over the next 4 days. I hope that some of these messages can find their way into the discussions that you have. I hope that you can help us broaden our toolkit, and that the activities here in Philadelphia will help us shape our profession to take on those challenges of the 21st century. Thank you all, and I hope that you all have a great symposium this week.
We have time for questions and answers. Steve has agreed to take questions. We have microphones. Looks like there's 4 of them out there. If you can please step up to the mic, ask your question clearly, loudly, so that everyone can hear it. Go ahead.
Please.
Some advice, maybe. I'm one of the engineers from one of the many defense contractors in the U.S. If you give some advice to those engineers in the crowd on the sharing of technical information. You know, we're in a public forum. There are things we obviously can't talk about, but certainly there are ways we want to contribute and advance system engineering and participate. Can you give some advice to us about how to make those decisions, things to do, things not to do?
Well, I encourage you to share. I think there's very little about the fundamentals of our engineering practice that get trapped in corporate or governmental intellectual property. I think that the toolkits that we develop, that the best practices that we develop, the experiences that we share in our domains, I think are enormously relevant, and we should be sharing those as broadly as possible. I think there's a great opportunity to kind of bridge kind of the traditional aerospace and defense domains with those emerging areas where system engineering is now finding a greater toehold. And I really do encourage those who are engaged in our business in government and defense industrial base to look more broadly at the larger community and to find ways to share our investments, our practices, and our capabilities. The administration has made a very large focus on sharing fundamental engineering and science as one of our goals. Just on Friday, there was a large conference at the White House on open science and engineering. The president is expected to make a few remarks on that topic later this week. We really are trying to break down barriers that have prevented us from sharing not only our investments, publishing as much work as we can openly and on the web, and in fact now sharing data sets much more globally than we have in the past. I think that is just a recognition of the larger benefit that we can offer to the community. So I encourage you to share.
Over here.
Would you comment on how the discipline of human factors engineering fits in the context of what you were discussing, please?
I think that we have often trapped human factors kind of work in a ghetto of specialty engineering, and I think that we need to be spending a lot more time thinking about how we integrate the human into our designs. I think that when we look at the way that our systems fail, the way our systems are challenged, so often it's a failure in design process to take the characteristics of operators, the characteristics of users into account early in the design process, and to keep their concerns relevant and explicit as we go forward through product design. And so I think it's a topic that we need to spend much more time integrating into our system engineering practice rather than having it be something separate and on the side. We tend to treat the human interaction with our system designs as something separable and something implicit. And I think it's something that needs to be much more at the core, explicitly defined, explicitly required, evaluated and assessed in a much more natural way as we progress across the system development process.
Jana.
Thank you. It's a very good talk. I'm curious. Engineers, as you know, have a certain cultural flavor of being nerds and unapproachable, etc. I have 2 daughters that are engineers, and what promoted them into that mind is actually B'Elanna Torres and Captain Janeway. Do you know who those characters are?
I do, actually. I'm a sufficient nerd to be able to recognize any Star Trek reference you'd like.
So what are we doing in terms of marketing ourselves at that level? Truly, my daughter loved B'Elanna Torres. okay? So what are we doing as engineers and as educators and as the Department of Defense even to promote that kind of gravitas in engineering?
I've often talked about the way that we culturally view engineering with the United States. Something I recommend that you don't do. But if you were to sit down and spend a week watching primetime television in the United States, I dare you to find an engineer represented as a positive role model in any piece of popular culture. In almost any cultural depiction, perhaps as the villain, but almost never in a positive aspect in popular culture. And I think that's a challenge in terms of how we portray our profession, how our profession is portrayed. Not just only in attracting almost any underserved portion of the population to engineering, attracting anybody to engineering. There's a number of things that we can do, and I think that I think you see very active and energetic efforts going on to generate role models within our own communities, to encourage folks to see STEM as an opportunity in a career for a broader set of the population. How effective those are, I don't know, but those beginning steps, I think, help make a case. We've also been spending time actually talking to folks in cultural spheres. I've actually had conversations with groups of screenwriters in Hollywood, for example, to talk about how engineers are depicted. And I think there are things that we can do to encourage greater representation as role models in popular culture. But I think it's really up to each of us. I think we are the ambassadors for engineering to our communities. I think that it's not the folks that we put up on posters for National Engineering Week are the people that we put in the box on our website to tell interesting stories. I think it really is all of us that have to maybe overcome that traditional introversion that attaches to the engineering profession and do a better job selling the joy of this profession to those that we meet every day. I think we're the best ambassadors for our profession. I think we do need to step up to that role.
Ann.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for highlighting the breadth of complex systems as our systems engineering community has begun to really grow beyond maybe our historical defense and aerospace roots into industries like transportation and healthcare, energy, and automotive. I wonder if you would just briefly speak to some of the healthcare and energy concerns. I'm not sure people realize how much that becomes a part of your picture at DoD.
When I often get asked about what system keeps me up at night the most, right? What thing that we're working on it presents the greatest challenge within the department, and everyone expects me to talk about the Joint Strike Fighter, right? It's always it's the poster child for these kind of things, and we certainly spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on that program, which I think is starting to turn the corner in interesting ways. But personally, when the Secretary asked me what efforts in the department kind of keep me up at night from a technical engineering perspective, I point to our healthcare initiatives. The future of the U.S. Department of Defense is largely going to be shaped by our ability to control the amazing trajectory of healthcare costs across this very large enterprise. And the use of technology to kind of address those problems is a very interesting and interesting technical and systems challenge for the department. The Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs themselves represent about 5% of the U.S. healthcare system. And that's really the largest single integrated piece of the U.S. healthcare enterprise, and all the challenges associated with healthcare delivery, patient safety, integration, data sharing, clinical interaction, and all the drivers behind cost of health delivery are buried in that process. And those are, at their heart, engineering challenges, systems challenges. Could have the same conversation about energy, and the enormous demands that our systems and our systems deployed in theater have for energy. department today, the largest deployer of solar farms within the country, large interactions with wind, biofuels, driving energy, smart grids, microgrids across our enterprise. These larger domains are buried in the context of what we do every day, just from the size and complexity of our mission. So while folks like myself grew up crashing airplanes in the desert, that's not the core of what we do in terms of capability delivery in the department today. It's a much broader set of issues, and the systems challenges span kind of all the things that I talked about here.
Thank you. I have time for one more. This gentleman's been waiting. I apologize. Maybe you can catch Steve afterward. Yes, sir.
In today's current economic environment, there's certainly a lot of interest in affordability, and you mentioned life cycle costs or cost of ownership when you talked about affordability. I'm just wondering what specific initiatives your organization might have to help or increase the affordability both of defense system development and also the cost of ownership.
I would be remiss if I didn't suggest looking at what is the major push today in defense acquisition, which is Better Buying Power 2.0. A set of initiatives, Better Buying Power 1.0, started by Dr. Ash Carter when he was head of acquisition, now Deputy Secretary of Defense, and by my boss now 2.0, Mr. Frank Kendall. Those are intended to be a set of tools to allow us to think differently about the cost of the systems we procure. And the Undersecretary and Deputy Secretary of Department have made an enormous commitment to cost consciousness in every part of what we do. That's really a defining aspect of the current defense environment. If we're going to be faced with the challenge of increasingly declining defense budgets over the foreseeable future, we have to ensure that we're getting the most effective capability for every dollar we invest in ways we have not had to focus on, perhaps in times when the budget tap was much more open. From a life cycle perspective, we're trying to do a much better job of understanding both how our portfolios are structured, what we can afford as a department, and now every time that we have a discussion about investment in the department, the first thing we talk about is kind of the 30 to 50 year projections. What do we think the department is going to need over that very long term? What do we think the department can afford? And what claim is any new investment we're going to make going to place on the department's projected budget going out in the very long term? So we're trying to get out of making short-term decisions, really inculcating that look at life cycle costs in everything we do. And then all the way down to the technical detail, our focus on ensuring that we have greater focus on open systems and modularity as a way to ensure a competition and upgrade in systems over time, our focus on reliability, warranty costs as a way to address life cycle implications, and the cost of reliability, the trades we make in terms of investment today, upfront in acquisition versus what we invest downstream in operations, maintenance, and support. We're making those trades much more explicit than we were even 2 or 3 years ago, and I can see that only increasing in the future.